In the heart of the world, on a narrow strip of land that many might consider insignificant to the great powers of the earth, lies a unique nation. It's not the largest, nor the most populated. It doesn't have vast natural reserves. However, its name resonates loudly in every corner of the planet. Its existence is unsettling, its persistence intriguing, and its history baffling. What nation are we talking about? Israel, the people of the covenant, God's chosen people. A 1,000-year-old nation whose history has profoundly influenced the course of humanity. A country small in territory but immense in significance. A people whose mere existence stirs intense passions, strategic alliances, conspiracy theories, and a hatred that has spanned generations. Why? Why do so many nations reject it? Why, throughout the centuries, from Pharaoh to Hitler, from Nebuchadnezzar to the current regimes, has there been a recurring obsession with trying to wipe this people off the face of the earth? Is it just a territorial dispute? A religious conflict? A political issue? No. This conflict goes far beyond the geopolitical. It's spiritual. It's the invisible war between light and darkness. It's the story of an eternal covenant and a global rebellion against the God who established it. Dear listener, in this documentary we will go through the Holy Scriptures. We will explore some of the darkest and most revealing moments in history, and we will analyze the current tensions that show us that this hatred is neither casual nor fleeting. It is prophetic. We will also see how, according to ancient biblical prophecies, at the end of time, nations will unite to invade and destroy the Holy Land, fulfilling what has been foretold since ancient times. Before we continue, we want to know your opinion. Why do you think so many nations hate Israel? Leave us your comment. Let's get started. In the Middle East, at the geographic center of the earth, lies a nation surrounded by fierce enemies. From the north, south, east, and west, the threats are real, persistent, and often violent. Israel today is a flashpoint of international tension, an epicenter of conflict, a constant spark of global controversy. But to understand why there is so much hatred against this nation, it is necessary to go back to its origins. It all begins with a divine call. In Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, God addresses a man named Abram and says, "Go from your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed." This moment is not only the beginning of a geographical journey, but also the beginning of a spiritual history that would give birth to the Hebrew people. From Abraham's descendants would come Isaac, Jacob later called Israel, and the 12 tribes that would form the nation. God establishes an eternal covenant with Abraham. He promises him land, descendants, and blessing. The land is Canaan, the descendants, an uncountable multitude, and the blessing, the role of being a channel of light to all nations. Israel was not chosen by merit but by grace. It was not because of its size or its power, but by the sovereign will of God. But that divine choice, which should have inspired reverence and admiration, provoked jealousy, resentment, and over time, hatred. From ancient times until today, many peoples have rejected that choice, not because Israel imposed it on the world, but because the world does not want to accept that God has the right to choose. The rejection of Israel is, at its core, a rejection of the God who chose it. Is it possible that the world hates Israel because it represents an inconvenient truth? Is the very existence of the Hebrew people, with its history, its miracles, and its restoration, living evidence that God exists and fulfills what he promises? If the people of Israel are standing today, it is a divine miracle. A small people in the midst of regional powers that outnumber, outgun, and outnumber them. But no weapon, no matter how powerful, has been able to erase their name. Despite constant attempts to destroy it, Israel remains. It lives. It defends itself and flourishes. Its existence is proof that God still keeps his word. History has shown that it is not by human power but by divine intervention that Israel remains standing. Throughout history, this question has hovered at the heart of empires, religions, ideologies, and political movements. And even today, it resonates more strongly than ever. To understand why Israel is so hated, we must look not only at human history, but at divine revelation. In Psalm 83, the psalmist Asaph records a disturbing vision, a cry to God in the face of a conspiracy against his people. This is not simply a military or political coalition. It is a spiritual manifestation of hatred directed at Israel and, by extension, at the God of Israel. Let's read Psalm 83, verses 1-5. O God, do not keep silent. Do not be silent, O God, nor be still. For behold, your enemies are roaring, and those who hate you are lifting up their heads. They have taken crafty and secret counsel against your people, and have taken counsel against your loved ones. They have said, Come, let us destroy them, that they may be no nation, and that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have conspired together in their hearts, they have made a league against you. This cry is urgent. The psalmist perceives an imminent threat, a conspiracy not only against Israel but against God himself. It's not just the people who are under attack, but his testimony, his covenant, his truth in the land. The enemy nations roar. They don't argue, they don't reason, they roar. It's a visceral ancestral hatred. A confederation of ancient nations. Later in the psalm, enemies such as Edom, Moab, Ammon, Amalek, the Philistines, the inhabitants of Tyre and Assyria are named. These peoples represent the geographical and spiritual enemies that have surrounded Israel since ancient times. Many scholars argue that this alliance has no complete historical parallel, suggesting that it is a prophecy yet to be fulfilled. What is the goal of this confederation? Let us destroy them so that they may no longer be a nation, and the name of Israel may be in remembrance no more. This is not a simple war. It is a deliberate attempt to erase your identity, your history, your existence. It is a project of total annihilation. It sounds radical, and it is. Because behind this hatred is a malignant spiritual mind, the adversary of God. They have consulted shrewdly and secretly. Here the enemy's strategy is revealed to us. He doesn't always attack with visible weapons. Often it does so in secret, diplomatic, cultural, and ideological ways. The language is current, strategies, secret meetings, pacts. Today, you don't need to drop a bomb to attack Israel. All you need is a UN resolution or a global smear campaign. Today, more than ever, the nation's hatred of Israel is evident. While the international media mobilizes with indignation over Palestinian casualties, the suffering of Israeli civilians, such as rocket attacks from Gaza, stabbings, or suicide attacks, receives little attention, and it is often justified under the guise of a supposed resistance. This bias is not new, but it has reached alarming levels. The death of an Israeli child is downplayed. That of a Palestinian child becomes a banner of global protest. Why such a radical double standard? The prophecy of Psalm 83 resounds more clearly than ever. What Asaph wrote centuries ago is not just ancient history. It is a spiritual snapshot of what is happening today in the 21st century. The United Nations, UN, which is supposed to ensure world peace, has condemned Israel more times than any other nation on the planet. Even more so than regimes like North Korea, Iran, or Syria. And this isn't just a perception, it's a verifiable fact. For example, Security Council Resolution 2334 in 2016 declared all Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank illegal, demanding that Israel immediately cease all colonization activities. Then, Resolution ES 10/21 of 2023 called for an immediate humanitarian truce in Gaza following Hamas attacks, but without condemning Hamas for initiating the October 7th massacre. In September 2024, the General Assembly demanded that Israel end its illegal presence in Palestinian territory within 12 months. In April 2024, the Human Rights Council passed a resolution accusing Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war, while ignoring atrocities committed by terrorist groups. In October 2024, a UN report was even more serious. It accused Israel of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. specifically highlighting attacks on hospitals and medical services in Gaza and the West Bank. In November of that year, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes. Over the years, Israel has been condemned at the UN hundreds of times, while nations where torture occurs, murderers and religious persecution receive little to no scrutiny. Why does the world's only Jewish state receive such harsh and unique treatment? The answer isn't just political, it's spiritual. Movements like BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, present themselves to the world as campaigns for justice and human rights for the Palestinian people. They use attractive language, freedom, equality, nonviolence, global awareness. But behind this rhetoric, the real objective is not peace or improving the quality of life for Palestinians. Their goal is to delegitimize the existence of the State of Israel. This movement was born in 2005, inspired by the campaigns against South African apartheid, but was quickly adopted and promoted by radical organizations with a clear vision: to make Israel an international pariah. Their strategy consists of exerting economic, cultural, academic, and diplomatic pressure to isolate Israel from the modern world, damage its economy, and marginalize it in all global arenas. BDS does not condemn Hamas or the Palestinian Authority for their corruption or terrorism. It does not propose constructive solutions or call for coexistence. Instead, it encourages companies to stop investing in Israel, artists to cancel their performances in Tel Aviv, universities to break agreements with Israeli institutions, and countries to impose diplomatic and economic sanctions. The result? Israeli researchers, many of them dedicated to medicine, technology, or science, have been excluded from international academic forums. Musicians and filmmakers are publicly pressured not to collaborate with apartheid. Multinational companies have closed operations in Israel for fear of a boycott. Meanwhile, Palestinians working for Israeli companies in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, who earn much higher wages than those in Hamas or Fatah-controlled territories, are losing their livelihoods. BDS doesn't employ them. It merely uses them as a political banner. The movement's hypocrisy is evident. There are no similar campaigns against China for its treatment of the Uyghurs. Neither against Iran for its abuse of women, nor against Syria for the millions of deaths in the civil war. Israel alone is the target of this international siege. Rabbi and scholar Jonathan Sachs, in his work Not in God's Name, explained that BDS is a new form of anti-Semitism. The individual Jew is no longer attacked as in medieval or Nazi Europe. Now the collective Jew is attacked, the State of Israel, and the goal remains the same: to erase its existence. Messianic Jewish theologian Amir Tsarfati has said, BDS does not seek justice for the Palestinians, it seeks revenge against God's plan. For if Israel is destroyed, the world can say that God has failed. This statement puts the spiritual focus where it should be. It's not just about economics, but about prophecy. What makes Israel's case unique is that no other country in the world faces an organized, systematic, and sustained global campaign aimed at wiping it off the map, both physically and morally. It is the living fulfillment of Psalm 83. It is a modern war with ideological, legal, and diplomatic weapons, but with the same ancient spirit of rebellion against God. Because Israel is not simply a nation, it is a reminder that God chooses, promises, and fulfills. Now, on social media, anti-Semitism has mutated. It's now expressed not through Nazi symbols, but through infographics, hashtags, and rhetoric disguised as justice. They present themselves as human rights defenders, but in essence, they reproduce the same message from Psalm 83: blot out the name of Israel. During the most recent war between Israel and Hamas in 2025, a pattern that has become predictable but disturbing was revealed. The massive international rejection of Israel, even when it acts in self-defense after indiscriminate terrorist attacks. While organizations like Hamas fired rockets at Israeli civilian populations and used their own people as human shields, the strongest, most numerous, and most forceful condemnations were directed not at the terrorists, but at Israel. Virtually the entire Western and Arab world spoke out. From the European Union to countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, criticism was directed at the Israeli offensive, especially in Gaza, without recognizing the initial context of aggression that motivated the military response. Calls were made to halt the operation in Rafah, prevent a ground invasion, and establish an immediate ceasefire, as if Israel had no right to protect its citizens from a constant threat. Presidents and foreign ministers used terms like disproportionate, war crime, and violation of international law. In France, Emmanuel Macron publicly expressed his opposition to the operation in Gaza. In Germany, the attacks on Rafah were described as unjustifiable. Spain, Italy, Ireland, and Belgium openly condemned Israel and called for an end to its military intervention. Countries like Turkey went further. President Erdogan called Israel a terrorist state and demanded its international isolation. In the Arab world, the condemnation was even harsher. Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and other governments in the region called Israel's actions flagrant violations of human rights. In UN forums, voices calling for sanctions, blockades, and international trials against Israeli leaders intensified, as demonstrated by the support for the decisions of the International Criminal Court that issued arrest warrants against Netanyahu and senior Israeli military officers. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres declared himself shocked by the number of civilian casualties in Gaza, failing to emphasize that these victims were being used as shields by Hamas, and failing to issue a commensurate condemnation of the initial massacre on October 7th. Most telling of all is this: few, if any, countries condemned Hamas with equal force for murdering, raping, and kidnapping Israeli civilians. The focus was on what Israel does, not what caused the conflict. The world mobilizes for marches in support of Palestine, but remains silent in the face of terrorist attacks against Israel. This asymmetry reveals something deeper than political differences. It reveals a spiritual root. Israel is the only nation in the world whose existence provokes such a level of rejection. Every time it responds militarily, even in defense, it is demonized globally. Its leaders are treated like criminals. Its allies are pressured to break off relations. And their people are also attacked abroad, as seen with the rise of anti-Semitism on the streets, in universities, and on social media. International law expert Richard Falk, who served as the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, has argued that Israeli settlement policies violate international law. Although its approach has been criticized for being biased, it reflects the dominant narrative within international organizations. On the other hand, Palestinian theologian Mitri Raheb argues that the Israeli occupation has profound ethical and theological consequences, although he has also been accused of using Christianity to support the Palestinian political cause and distorting scripture. However, many evangelical theologians and biblical scholars, such as Michael Brown, Amir Tsarfati, and Joel Rosenberg, have pointed out that this hostility toward Israel is, at its core, a spiritual conflict. Brown says, hatred toward Israel is not simply explained by politics. It's a cosmic battle, a war against the testimony that God keeps his word. Tsarfati adds, Israel isn't perfect, but it's the only nation in the world that proves God is faithful, and the devil doesn't like that. Israel is the only country in the world whose right to exist is publicly questioned. The marches calling for from the river to the sea do not seek peaceful coexistence. They seek the total elimination of Israel, and let us remember the Jewish people have been victims of pogroms, inquisitions, expulsions, the Holocaust, and now a modern war disguised as diplomacy. This hatred is not accidental. It's ancient, but it hasn't lost its power. It's spiritual, but it manifests itself in political decisions. It's prophetic, but it lives on in every headline, every resolution, every boycott campaign. Israel is not just a nation. It is a sign. It is a stumbling block to the nations, just as Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3 prophesied, "And on that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all peoples. All who burden themselves with it will be broken in pieces, though all the nations of the earth will gather against it." And you, dear listener, can you see the connection? Do you recognize that what's at stake isn't just a land or a flag, but the testimony that God keeps his promises? Because if Israel exists, then God is faithful. And if God is faithful, His word is true. And if His word is true, then the world needs to repent, and that many are unwilling to accept. Now, since its beginnings, the people of Israel have been subjected to constant persecution that transcends the political or cultural. It is a story of pain, but also of miraculous survival. The story begins with the Hebrew people enslaved for centuries. Pharaoh ordered the death of all newborn Hebrew males, a child genocide intended to annihilate their future. In the 6th century before Christ, Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple burned. The people were taken into exile. It was a deep wound. The promised land was taken from them and the worship of God was uprooted. In 70 after Christ, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple and dispersed the Jewish people throughout the empire. The diaspora was born, and with it, centuries of marginalization and violence. In medieval Europe, Jews were expelled from countries, confined in ghettos, forced to convert, or murdered in pogroms. During the Inquisition, they were persecuted as heretics, tortured, and burned alive. In the 20th century, anti-Semitism reached its peak with Hitler. 6 million Jews were exterminated in gas chambers and concentration camps. It was the modern attempt to erase the Jewish people from history. But Israel still lives. Despite the pharaohs, emperors, inquisitors, and dictators, the Jewish people remain. Against all human logic, they returned to their homeland in 1948. Israel's existence is a living testimony that God does not forget His promises. This is not just a story of suffering. It is a testament to divine faithfulness, because the God of Israel remains faithful. In 1948, after centuries of exile, persecution, and death, the Jewish people officially declared the birth of the State of Israel. It was a historic moment, but also a prophetic one. Within hours, neighboring Arab nations declared war. They wanted to wipe the fledgling state off the map, but they couldn't. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel surprisingly defeated several Arab armies in record time, and in 1973, during Yom Kippur, it resisted a surprise attack while fasting. The victories were so striking that many still consider them miraculous. This rebirth is not only political, it is also spiritual. The prophet Ezekiel, in chapter 37, spoke of a valley of dry bones that revive and rise like a great army. So too did Israel return. From the furnaces of the Holocaust, a living, strong, and determined nation emerged. Dear listeners, let us remember that this is not simply a political or territorial difference. Over the decades, several leaders in the Arab world have explicitly expressed their desire to wipe Israel off the map. This is not an interpretation or an exaggeration. These are their own words. In 1988, Hamas's founding charter made its objective clear. Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam destroys it, just as it has erased others before it. More recently, in 2023, senior Hamas official Ghazi Hamad stated in a television interview, "Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth. It's a country of animals that recognizes no human value. It's a cancer that must be eradicated." These are not random phrases. They reflect a deeply rooted ideology that seeks not coexistence or a peaceful solution, but rather the total disappearance of the Jewish state. This is the same mentality that resonates in Psalm 83, where it is prophesied that nations will unite to say, "Come, and let us destroy them, that they may not be a nation, and the name of Israel may be remembered no more." Faced with this, we understand that the conflict is not only geopolitical, it is spiritual. Because Israel, by existing, testifies that God keeps His promises, and that testimony is what many cannot bear. But why is it so upsetting that Israel has returned to its land? Because its existence is proof that God keeps His promises, and that, for a world that wants to live without God, is a stumbling block. Israel is not only revived in the land, it is also revived in the eternal message of the God who never forgets His people. Dear listeners, the Bible reveals to us that in the final days, Israel will be the target of increasing global hostility. What we see in the news today, resolutions, protests, threats, and attacks, is nothing new. It is prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes. In Psalm 83, we find the conspiracy to wipe out Israel. Verses 4 and 5 say, "They have said, 'Come, let us destroy them, that they may be no nation, and that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have conspired together in their hearts. They have made a league against you. This prophecy describes a coalition of nations uniting with a clear objective: to wipe Israel off the map. It's not just a war over territory, it's an attempt to eliminate its very existence. Most strikingly, verse 5 reveals that this hatred is not only against Israel, but against God himself. By attacking his people, they rebel against him. Although some believe this was a historical coalition, other interpreters consider it to be a future war, distinct from the invasion of Gog and Magog. The nations mentioned above, Edom, Ishmaelites, Moab, Ammon, Amalek, Tyre, and Philistia, when viewed on a modern map correspond to regions such as Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, Saudi Arabia, and parts of Iraq. That is, they are Israel's immediate neighbors. The description suggests a coordinated regional conflict, an alliance of spiritual hatred, where the target is not just Israel, but those protected by God. This event could occur before the War of Gog and Magog, setting the prophetic stage for an even greater confrontation. Today, this same mentality is echoed in modern movements and discourses. From Hamas to certain international forums, the same ancient echo can be heard: Israel has no right to exist. But God had already warned us. Another prophecy portrays Jerusalem as a burdensome stone for the nations. Let's read Zechariah chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling to all the surrounding peoples against Judah in the siege against Jerusalem. And on that day, I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all peoples. All who burden themselves with it will be broken in pieces, though all the nations of the earth will gather against it. Jerusalem will become the center of global conflict. It is not just any city, it is the city God chose. It will be like a stone that everyone will try to move according to their own interests, but in doing so, they will be wounded. The text is clear. All nations will unite against her. We are already seeing this. The international community is pressuring Israel, attempting to divide Jerusalem and proposing peace plans that contradict Scripture. But God has placed Jerusalem as a stone that no one can touch without consequences. Another prophecy also shows the judgment for touching Israel and dividing its land. Let's read Joel chapter 3, verse 2. I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and there I will enter into judgment with them for my people and for my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and have divided my land. God himself promises that he will judge the nations for 3 reasons: for having dispersed the Jewish people, for having mistreated Israel, and for having divided up the land that he gave as an inheritance. Today we see how many nations are pressuring Israel to surrender parts of its land in exchange for peace, contradicting divine law. But God calls this a crime, which he will personally judge. What he has eternally promised cannot be divided. The prophet Ezekiel, in chapters 38 and 39, depicts the war between Gog and Magog. This is one of the most impressive prophecies. In the last days, a coalition led by Gog, identified by many as Russia, along with Iran, Turkey, Libya, Sudan, and other nations, will invade Israel from the north. Israel will be confident and will be attacked by surprise. But God will intervene supernaturally, with earthquakes, fire from heaven, and confusion among the enemies. This will not be a military victory for Israel, but a manifestation of Jehovah's power so that all nations will recognize him. In Zechariah chapter 14, verses 2 and 3, it says, For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be taken, and the houses will be plundered, and the women ravished, and half of the city will go into captivity, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations, as he fought in the day of battle. This passage describes the most critical moment for Israel. Jerusalem will be surrounded and attacked by all nations. It will be a tragedy. But just when all seems lost, the Lord will come out to fight. As in ancient times, Jehovah himself will rise up to defend his people. This event is the prelude to the glorious return of the Messiah. But before that, Israel will pass through a fiery purification. Now, the Bible clearly announces that in the last days, Israel will face its greatest trial, not because of a specific nation, but because of a figure prophesied since ancient times, the Antichrist. This won't just be a political leader, he'll be a satanic instrument with global power, and his agenda will include the final betrayal and persecution of Israel. In Daniel chapter 9 verse 27 it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. In the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Then with the multitude of abominations the desolator will come until the consummation comes, and what is determined is poured out upon the desolator." This prophecy speaks of a week, that is, 7 prophetic years. The Antichrist will sign a peace agreement with Israel and other nations, which will bring apparent tranquility. Even the rebuilding of the temple and the restoration of sacrifices will be permitted. But 3.5 years later, that covenant will be violently broken. The Antichrist will put an end to the worship of God and will enter the temple as if he himself were divine. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4 it says, "Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." After breaking the covenant, the Antichrist will fully reveal himself. He will enter the temple of Jerusalem and demand worship, declaring himself to be God. This act is what Jesus calls the abomination of desolation. From that moment on, a great persecution broke out against Israel, especially against those who refused to worship him. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus himself warns the inhabitants of Judea, that is the Jews. When they see the Antichrist desecrating the temple, they must flee immediately. There will be no time to pack. What lies ahead will be a tribulation never before seen. This will be the greatest persecution Israel has ever faced in its history. In Revelation chapter 12, verses 13 and 14, we read, "Now when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which had given birth to the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent." Here, the woman represents Israel. The dragon, Satan, persecutes the Jewish people through the Antichrist. But God will provide a place in the wilderness where a remnant of Israel will be protected for 3.5 years, the same period that remains after the breaking of the covenant. It is a time of supernatural refuge. In Zechariah chapter 14, verses 2 and 3, the final attack on Jerusalem is described again. "For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be taken, and the houses will be plundered, and the women ravished. And half of the city will go into captivity, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations, as he fought in the day of battle." At the end of the Great Tribulation, the Antichrist will gather all the nations under his control to attack Jerusalem. The city will be invaded, and there will be suffering, looting, and chaos. But just when all seems lost, Jehovah will rise up to defend his people. This is the time of the Messiah's glorious return, when his feet will touch the Mount of Olives, and he himself will fight for Israel. The final attack against Israel will be led by the Antichrist, who will first deceive with a covenant, then betray Israel, desecrate the temple, and mercilessly persecute the Jewish people. But the end will not be defeat, it will be redemption, because the Messiah will come with power and glory, destroy the Antichrist, and free Israel as he promised. After reviewing the prophecies that foretell the darkest days for Israel, wars, betrayal, persecution, and a final attack led by the Antichrist, it is natural for many to wonder, how will such a small nation survive such great hatred? But then Scripture reminds us of an eternal truth, simple but glorious. Psalm 121 verse 4 says, "Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep." This isn't about an army, a world power, or a political alliance. It's about God. He is the one who guards Israel. He is the one who formed it, who dispersed it through discipline, and who brought it back through faithfulness. He is the one who sealed eternal promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he does not sleep. While the world's leaders gather to make resolutions, while Israel's enemies sharpen their words and their weapons, and while the headlines fill with hatred and threats, God continues to watch. God has not let go of his people. Israel has been oppressed by Egypt, invaded by Babylon, dispersed by Rome, persecuted by Europe, battered by the Holocaust, and today surrounded by modern enemies. And yet, he remains standing. Why? Because he who guards Israel never sleeps for a moment. History isn't being written by the news. History is in the hands of the Almighty. A great trial will come. The Antichrist will rise. Jerusalem will be surrounded. The temple will be desecrated. But just when it seems all is lost, the heavens will open. The king will return. His feet will touch the Mount of Olives. And on that day, every eye will see that Israel was never alone. The world may condemn Israel. The nations may surround her. The enemy may launch his final attack. But Israel's guardian is awake, and when he arises, her enemies are scattered. And so we come to the end of this video. We pray that this teaching has been helpful to you, that it has opened your eyes, strengthened your faith, and ignited your hope. Share this message. Proclaim the truth. And above all, stay vigilant, because the prophecies are being fulfilled, and redemption is closer than ever. Maranatha, the Lord is coming.